Thanks for listening to the TLDC podcast. My name is Luis Mulbus, and I hope you're enjoying the broadcasts and episodes the training, learning, and development community produces. Our goal is to continue exploring topics and people of interest in the learning and development space, and hopefully provide you with inspiration, focus, and a sense of community in your career. Thinking about launching a digital learning game project in your organization and need some help forming your own case for investment? Here's the episode for you. Jennifer Javornik of Filament Games joined us to discuss using corporate training games when your organization isn't feeling playful. She offers 5 sensible tips that can help you get buy-in from your company and find support for game-based learning initiatives in your organization. And if you find this and our other content useful, please consider supporting us with a membership. Go to thetldc.com, join as a member, and for a limited time, use the code SUPPORTTLDC to get 50% off the annual standard rate. That's only $37.50 a year. It really helps us continue to broadcast episodes, build community, and share valuable resources for L&D professionals around the world. Thanks for listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Training, Learning, and Development community. Happy Monday. We're here. It's May, and today we're going to be talking with Jennifer Javornik, and we're talking about corporate training games when your organization isn't playful. And really excited to do this one because met Jennifer, I don't know, like through email, coming in into Community Day, and was able to check out Filament Games, and it was exciting actually having somebody that was like in the gaming space for Community Day and all the stuff associated with storytelling. And I was telling Jennifer beforehand, when I was putting together the expo, my son came in when I was loading Filament Games into the back end of the community platform, and he saw it. He's only 7, and he's like, "Hey, I play some of those games," and he was really excited because he plays a variety of them that were on PBS Kids, I guess. And so he just sort of sat with me and showed me which one. So that was very, very cool. And now he asks me every other day, "What's the name of that? Is it Filament Games?" I'm like, "Yeah." And it's just him trying to get back to the computer and asking if he could play some more. But Jennifer, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's start a little bit about your background. Kim saying future employee. Yeah, possibly. Let's talk about your background a little bit. So you're in the L&D space now. You've got a gaming company. You're VP of sales, I think it is, for Filament Games. But your background is IT. Tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are now. Like, let's hear about your journey.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm an accidental technology person. And it's a great story. I graduated from my undergrad with a liberal arts degree. My major was actually in theater, although somehow I never thought I would actually go do theater for a living. And kind of a year after graduation, I kind of was working for a startup that I had worked for previously, but it wasn't really kind of a career path. I was living in Montreal, where I'm from, and I had a friend that I had who lived in California, and she kept saying, "I want you to visit me." And I thought, well, like I wasn't making much money. The tickets across the border are a little bit more expensive, so I was like, I can't afford a $600 ticket to come see you. So she was like, "Listen," she cooked up this plan. She's like, "Listen, my company, there's this thing coming. It's called Y2K. And my company is hiring like crazy. So here's the thing. Give me your resume. I'm going to submit it. I'm going to really talk you up. I'm sure they're going to interview you. And then they'll fly you out to California for the interview. Just tell them you have to interview on a Friday. And then tell them you want your return ticket like on the Monday. And then you can come spend the weekend for me." And somehow I did it. That's literally the story of how I got started in tech. It was all a ruse. The funny thing is that I did do a phone screen with the recruiter out of California, and he called me back and he's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know we're interested in in-person interviews. We want to fly you out." And I'm like, "All right, good. This plan is coming to fruition." And he's like, "But actually, we are not looking for anyone for your particular skill set right now in California, but our office in Chicago is looking. So we're going to be flying you out to Chicago. And then I was kind of like, what? Like, I don't know. I knew nothing about Chicago. Being in Canada, I was like Oprah, Michael Jordan, like that's all I knew. And anyway, so that's how I ended up being a Midwesterner. And that's how I ended up, I was part of a program where they were training non-technical people in COBOL. So we could go fix Y2K bugs because there's just weren't enough COBOL programmers.
Right.
And I'm actually so grateful because IT has been a great fit for me in my career.
Wow. That is a really amazing story. Did you end up making it to California though?
I mean, eventually, because, you know, they were, you know, it was like 97 and they were recruiting people out of college and we were working crazy hours, but we, you know, the salaries were amazing. So suddenly I was flush and I could afford my own tickets.
That is great. It seems like I've met other people, including myself, who kind of made the switch over to IT because of Y2K, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's what I was
doing. The world, Louis.
Right. And you know, with a sort of a performance background too, there's a lot of similarities there. But yeah, I did the same thing because where I was working in manufacturing and we had a bunch of computers and they're like, oh, this Y2K thing, someone needs to figure this out. And I was always the go-to computer guy anyway. And so they're like, hey, you're the one that fixes the printer all the time. Why don't you figure out what we need to do for Y2K?
Yeah.
Ended up going to night school for a year and a half to figure it out. So yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And then now you are over at Filament Games. I know, like prior to this, you were doing some consulting, IT consulting.
I had a really great career before Filament Games. I worked for 18 years for a global consulting company. I was particularly in a vertical that was focused on IT solutions for governments, so most state and local and county governments. And you know, I mean, on the positive side, there's nothing like joining a well-established large organizations. You just get your chops on process organization. You get some really great skills. The downside of it for me is that I didn't realize until I left 18 years later that like culturally, it was just it was just not a great fit for me. It was indeed one of these organizations that weren't very playful. And I kind of, when I was in it, like I didn't realize like how much it affected my happiness and my health. I actually started while I was working in IT consulting. I ended up just on the side, like auditioning for a local improv company. And I ended up doing a 15-year career as a professional improviser, kind of on nights and weekends. And I just fit it into my schedule. And it was funny because a year after joining Filament, I was like, I don't know, I don't like this anymore. And I realized that while I was working in global IT consulting, I mean, we did things, you know, like we did accounting system. We were really involved in Obamacare. I just needed this creative outlet to balance how the other thing was not feeding my soul. And when kind of I came to Filament and I was blending for the first time, like my tech background and my kind of performance play background together, and kind of found this opportunity to work in a space where it used all the parts of me. So it's been a great fit for me. I've been here 6 years and I've really loved it.
So no improv anymore?
No, I didn't need it. I mean, I work now with such a creative organization. And, you know, I get the chance to talk to anyone who's ever interested in working with us. So all day I'm talking to interesting people and specific organizations that have specific needs or project, and I kind of get into their lives and what they need and kind of pitch things to them. So I don't know, I got to a point with improv where it was like, I feel like for most of my career, it was like, I got so much out of it. And I think by the end, I was like, okay, I'm giving too much. I want my Saturday night back. I kind of for years spent entertaining people on their birthdays and anniversaries and making people laugh. And I was just like, all right, it's me time. I'm going to stop doing that.
Very cool. So tell us a little bit about Filament Games. Like, I'd like to learn more. It seemed like you had just a variety of things available there, like from kids to grown-ups. Can you talk a little bit about
Filament is a gem of a company. So we're located in Madison, Wisconsin, but we work with customers all over the world. And our expertise is how do you take learning content, goals, subject matter expertise, and transform it into high quality digital game simulations, VR experiences. So as a company, it's awesome because we make games for 2-year-olds all the way to senior citizens. We make things that everything from gamey games on PBS Kids all to some really, we've actually worked on projects where we're working with companies who are developing games as going through FDA approval to be a medical prescription. So we do any age, any platform. So we make games for browsers, mobile phones, tablets, VR equipment. We get approached by like custom device companies that want to make a game to go with their custom device. So really our expertise is like designing and building these experiences. And we really, our big mantra is we want you to have an engaging, amazing experience in the game, but we really kind of rate our success based on how well the player is transformed in the real world. So all of our methodologies are like, yeah, have a great time in the game, but we want you to come out of it with increased knowledge, a behavior change, a mindset shift. We want to make you activated to go take steps to do something. So in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Nice. So let's talk about these corporate training games. And you could even use, for example, like, the consulting firm that you came from, and like being able to sort of get like corporate training games into a place like that. Like what suggestions do you have? Are there specific games that you guys have like created just for this purpose, or what kind of advice can you offer?
Yeah, so our Filament Games approach is we're a custom development shop. So we don't come with a bunch of templated games where learning organizations will just upload their content. You want to hire us if you want to create like an experience where the experience is really geared towards your learning objective. I feel like when I talk to organizations, it's always like I get to talk to the person who's really playful in a non-playful organization, right? Like they see the vision, they see the idea. I rarely talk to the curmudgeon. I talk to that like one bright light who sees it. So I feel like when I think about like the objections or what people struggle for, there's definitely some patterns of where the issue is. So I think first and foremost, you get the objection that like culturally, like games feel childish, right? Like the corporate, like the culture of the organization is very serious, probably really high stakes, probably are under a lot of pressure. And like just the idea of playing games is like not part of their identity as an organization. So it's funny, when I run into that, I kind of think of a couple different ways that I've seen my clients kind of navigate that situation. I mean, the first and foremost thing is, for the love of all things, drop the word game. Like, I know it's right in our name, which is, sometimes I wish we were just Filament and not Filament Games. But really, and there's no shame in that. I think the word, game is associated with play, and really, substitute words you can use are things like simulations, interactive learning, digital learning, experiential learning, because that's what games are, right? Like games, so much of the training that employee receives is passive. They have to read something, they have to watch a video, they have to listen to someone speaking. Yeah, there might be something interactive that's more like assessment, that's more like, okay, now do these assessment exercise to see if you've been paying attention. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking the types of games we made is the learning actually happens in the game. We're going to give you some information, but it's really a space where you can experiment with the content, try things out, fail, push come up with really solutions. When I say games, it's more like, you can't just be a passerby. Like literally the game doesn't progress unless you do something. So I think in one way, sometimes you can just repackage it as experiential learning or digital learning or interactive learning, and just, drop the word games. That's
right. No, that's a really, really good one. And it's funny because I'm seeing experiential learning so much more lately.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's like, It's because those are just games.
Maybe I think it just makes it more palatable. I mean, I think the second thing is there's like so much good data you can pull out, especially if you're like that vibrant person really championing for games in your organization. Like, there's just really good data on it. So the one, there's an organization called Metari. It's METAARA. They put out annually kind of a state of the industry of game-based learning, and they do spend a lot of time on corporate games as a vertical, and they're more for if you get the report, even like the synopsis that they put out for free is actually very helpful, and it could show you, it could just show you the amount of adoption in an organization, kind of the types of games that corporate organizations are playing. I think that kind of data as a framework when you're championing for games is helpful, because it basically can show your organization that, you know, in 2021, this is not going out on a huge limb to do something crazy. It's actually very much accepted as part of a learning and development team's like offerings, and you can kind of see how it plays out. There's also a lot of just efficacy data. You know, we focus on custom games, so it's kind of like I can't rate the effectiveness of the game we're about to create, because it doesn't exist yet, but you can find pretty easily like just examples of other custom games. We have them too that have been created, and you can kind of pull all the outcome data. I think something that's consistently, if you look at the research in corporate game-based learning, is one of the themes that comes out is when you compare learning through a game, through other modalities, it always rates higher on the effectiveness and usually higher on the engagement. So
nice.
That's other good themes to bring up.
Let me just back up a little bit. You said Metari, METTARE?
No, it's weird. METAARI.
RI. Okay.
Go ahead and Google Metari game-based learning report. And yeah, and there's an organization called Serious Play, which is an industry organization. They usually, if you go to their conference, they, I think their participants are able to get the report for free, or the organization comes and reveals the whole report. There's some kind of way where you can get access to it.
Cool.
It's a great industry report. I think the third thing that some organizations fight up against, which is a little bit different than the other two reasons, is that some organizations, it just brings up fear. And I'll tell you about the types of fear that I'm talking about. Like, as soon as you say game, that word again, there's a lot of employees, especially, you know, some Gen Xers, baby boomers, who just have some limiting beliefs of like, oh, I can't play games. I don't play games. I'm not very good at games. So when suddenly if you're talking about like, we're going to create a game for learning, they've probably had an experience where they tried to play with their child or grandchild a game, even like a platformer game like Mario, or some kind of games where they took over the handheld and like tried to press the buttons, and it was too much like input. It's too hard to coordinate. During the pandemic, I decided to buy my family a video game console, and I had to get a Wii because I can't deal with all the like buttons on the controller myself. So I think that's one of the fears. I think the other fear is just people who aren't as familiar with technology, just being concerned about just the digital adoption. So I think the one thing I can say about that is just, if that's been someone's experience, you know, all of the games we make are to be played in a corporate setting. So we assume people have a computer with a keyboard and a mouse. Unless the objectives of your games are time-based, like there's some reason where your people have to get faster at something, unless it's that, none of our games we usually don't design a game that's time-based or super like twitchy, like you got to combine two different commands to make it do something, because that doesn't really feed the learning objectives. So we can do a lot. If that's one of the organization concerns, we can kind of expressly design so that it doesn't require a high level of digital competencies to be able to successfully execute the game.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. That's excellent. Yeah, like Kim is saying, boomers are probably not the main audience for workplace games anyway, and she's a boomer, even though she's a really, really nerdy boomer for sure.
Yes.
And Danny's saying he adds, often many corporations have a rigid culture that can be based on fear of making mistakes, fear of being perceived as not serious about business, etc.
That's a great point, Benny. Yeah. I mean, one of the things I said is that's another fear that comes up. I think especially because when some corporations have like dabbled in game, a kind of a quick way to kind of test games would be to pull up like a templated game, like probably the most popular is Jeopardy. And they play it in a group setting, right? So then suddenly it becomes like, if you think about a game like Jeopardy, it's like a high stakes, depending on how comfortable you are with your colleagues, but it's an assessment game. It's just, Jeopardy is just a quiz game to see your knowledge retention. So if that's someone's first experience with games, there can be a fear of like, I don't want to look dumb around my coworkers. Jeopardy is usually timed, so I don't want the time pressure. So I think some of the ways to get around that in terms is you can think about making a single player experience so people can play in private. One of the tricks or one of the things we do when we design any kind of learning game is there's no fail state. We actually celebrate failure in our games. So video games, very common to try something, it doesn't work. Guess what? You try a game. So we never design games that like, oh, you're out of lives or you died, you don't get to learn anymore. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of, not only are they gently scaffolded, like we very slowly introduce concepts, make them try one thing. The game celebrates you for sort of succeeding at it. We introduced a next component of the game. You now get an easy way to do that. We celebrate a game. I mean, it's all really meant to bring along the learner in the experience and make them feel successful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to mention here Anne, who is also in the gaming industry. She's saying, in our experience, though, we find that Gen X and boomers are the ones for whom we have to turn off games so they keep to the day job. For Gen Y, it's business as usual. And yeah, I can totally see that as well. And Kim's saying, I think one key is that those presenting the game's concept to a company has an inclusive mindset for all generations. Yeah, and I think about that with this audience, like you mentioned, they're all, these are the bright lights, that might be presenting this information to the organization. So I
I'd like to correct myself. There's certainly a lot of millennials or even Gen Ys who are not interested in games or not kind of digitally savvy. I think in the end, if you're making something custom, you should tailor it to the audience that you are going to be appealing to. And I think that when you do have a multi-generational audience, you try to focus on kind of you try to make sure that the game is very like playable, like that the visual interaction design makes sense, that no one is going to be impaired by moving forward in the game because they don't understand the controls.
Right. Taruna is saying, I think it's important to consider both culture and context when using game-based learning. And I'm just wondering, do you have any examples? Do you have any success stories that you can share with us?
Yeah, I know we've done a lot in the corporate training space. I think we worked for a really big management consulting organization that had an initiative in their kind of nonprofit arm that they were looking to upskill like 5 million people around the world in 5 years. And they really had a hands-on approach. They would build a cohort. They would go in for 12 weeks. They were really focused on upskilling people who, just to get the minimum amount of skills required to be successful in a retail associate's job. And this was not only US-based, but in multiple continents around the world. But really and then they were working specifically with employers who would kind of pre-agree to take on their graduates to go fulfill, retail associates. And they just saw through their program, in early versions of their program, They would do, in classroom training, they would do group assignments, independent assignments, they would do role playing. But the role playing was problematic because a lot of times that was creating a lot of anxiety in the students that were in the job already. The people that they were upskilling were people who felt unsuccessful in a work environment, and that the role play, getting in front of your class and playing out retail scenarios was too high stakes. It relied on people coming up with like things to say. It was really more a test of improv skills than actually retail skills. So they approached us about kind of creating a digital simulation. So creating an experience where their participants would go online and they would learn how, but then experience a day in the life of a retail associate. So there would be kind of standard things they had to do during the day, during their shift. But then also one of the hardest things for someone in retail is you've got your job you have to do, but then customers come up with you with different problems. There's spills that occur. There's customers who need things. So so we we started first with the resale associates training. We did a pilot for their first cohort, and with them that we were still involved in because it was while we were developing the game. And their feedback survey said 100% of the feedbacks responded that we prefer to learn this way than through role play. So that was really good. And something that they still use today. I mean, I'll say one of the realities of filament games is that often what we make for clients is very proprietary. And because it's custom development and our clients end up owning the IP, most of the time we're not really privy to what the outcomes are, what the successes are, just because it's very confidential to them. So I've got a couple of where they've shared things that I'm able to share, but in terms of like how it affects the bottom line or how, we don't get that information.
So how about just generally on adoption? Do you guys have ever run into that challenge where just overall people just aren't playing the games, or do you have any support system for being able to overcome things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when clients with corporations work with us, we really need to understand who's the learners and what their learning preferences are. It's no different to all of you being training professionals. It just depends on the person, right? Like some rules of thumb, which are just simplifications, but have some merit to it, is like when we think about designing training games for salespeople, we often add a competitive element because salespeople are competitive. If we're working, creating a game for like field technicians or people that are out driving around to sites and kind of part of their day is they're not at a desk all day, we might think of creating games that can be consumed as micro learning, so that if they have more, give them something to do for 21 days, but it's kind of a 15-minute experience where you're kind of growing the experience over time. So I think a lot of time, I mean, it's the same thing with games. You have to understand the preferences, the learner habits. You have to understand how what their day looks like and how they like consuming learning content, and we can kind of frame or design the experience to take that in and to take that to account.
That's great. Let's see. So Kim is asking here, is there a point where the ROI doesn't make sense for game-based learning? That is, when is a more minimalistic approach better?
All right, so that's a great question. I mean, there's no, one of the realities of creating a custom learning game for your organization is that it's going to be, and sometimes it's 10x what the cost of what doing a video or creating e-learning costs. So there's just a investment to make in this. I think a couple things I think about when you're thinking about learning games is either aligning it to your organization's biggest initiative, most important initiative. So try to be able to justify the cost and investment to make a game. If it's kind of a corporate-wide initiative that you're creating a game about where every person at your organization will be touched by it, can be a way to justify the ROI. it's interesting because a lot of times 2 years ago when I talk about ROI, I talk about, well, think about the time it takes to fly places and do learning, but so much has changed because of the pandemic. I think more you're just talking about the, touching as many people as you can in the organization. I think the second thing I have people think about is align your game to the company's biggest pain points. So if there's really parts of your organization that you know that it would be better if people kind of actually did and consumed this training as a way to justify it. I think repurposing the game is another good idea to kind of play with the ROI. So we had an organization where we built a corporate training game for them, but they also actually were able to release a version that had non-proprietary specifics in it. We just tweaked the content a bit to actually put it out to the public so that, or actually theirs wasn't to the public. They would send it to potentially people they were recruiting as kind of a way to not only do assessment, but to kind of provide them a playful introduction to their company. So I think you do have to make things. I mean, to think of, we can design a game so that the content can be replaced and refreshed over time. I think that's one way to really get the maximum out of your game so that as the content evolves, your game can evolve. I think the one thing I would caution is that works to a limited expense, but some people come to us and we're like, well, can you make a game that like we could use for a lot of different types of training? What I caution you is when you look at games that can deal with a lot of different types of training. So you're training your engineers to do something technical, but you're also training your business people about the product. And essentially those become, so we call those content agnostic games. So games where you upload the content. Essentially those turn into assessment games because essentially all you can do to treat different kind of content is ask questions about the content and then quiz people on the response or do a match or do some kind of frame that you're just really testing a person's knowledge to really create games where people are learning in the game. Like if you want to teach engineers about a new piece of equipment of your company, sure, you can create a game where you can have questions and answers about that equipment. But really, ideally for people to learn the equipment is you would recreate the equipment in a digital environment and have them build or troubleshoot or deal with certain crises with the equipment. You would kind of tailor it specifically to that equipment.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's great advice. Thank you so much. So just curious about Filament. You mentioned, are you guys doing VR games now too? Is that something that you?
Yes. So we do VR, AR custom products. It's interesting. Like the great thing about obviously VR and AR, it takes away some of the clickiness of the game, right? It's much more intuitive for people to move their bodies than to click keyboard combinations. However, if you're working with the more deluxe version of VR, there's still buttons on those handhelds, so it's not always the case.
Right. Wow, that's fantastic.
VR is just really great for learning when your learner needs to embody a practice.
Right.
So, I mean, it could be done. I don't really see it. I'm not going to say never, but like making an accounting game in VR just feels like annoying because accounting is a lot of numbers and math and like doing it like with your arms might feel, but obviously a lot of games that involve either being in a place where the place is important or you want the person to learn. An embodied experience. VR is great.
This is great. So I think Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing like those 3 tips for getting some of these bright lights to bring gaming into their organizations. Really, really helps. I can't wait to share this one. And what's ahead for you and Filament Games?
More games. I mean, we're just on a constant roll of making new clients, new games, old clients, new games. I think the one exciting thing that's happening in our lives is in the last few years, we've participated in the National Science Foundation SBIR program. It's a small business innovation research program, and we've successfully won a phase 1 and phase 2, which is $1 million award. And they granted us the money to develop a digital robotics experience. So the idea of like a high school robotics program, but in virtual, which has been much needed during the pandemic. So yeah, we're doing our first commercial game release. So it'll be released on Steam. It's just a cool, fun entertainment games where you build robots, but we're also partnering with First Robotics, which is like a big global traditional robotics tournament framework where they're going to be running virtual competitions with Roboco. So we're excited about that.
Nice. Have you seen, because of the pandemic, has there been an increased demand for games? Have you noticed that at all? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of 50-50, right? Like, especially, I feel like some organizations who were on the fence about working with us to create games, it was 50-50. Like, half of the people were like, we need this now, we're investing, now's the right time. And the other half were like, oh, don't know what our revenue is going to look like. Now is not the time to try anything different. And certainly as organizations tried to relearn how to serve their customers through a digital format, a lot of them, the thought of taking on a new project was just not feasible. But I think, I think you can't deny that we have been in this pandemic for over a year. It's kind of changed our relationship with technology, and it's I think changed our relationship with training in particular. I think we spend so much time on video calls and kind of interacting through a screen that a lot of times games can be a nice addition to kind of change how the people are interacting digitally from what their day-to-day looks like.
Right. Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. This conversation has just given me a lot to think about. And even just within this community and talking about games, because it's not something that we really discuss a whole heck of a lot. And so, I might have to, or I actually should change that, because it feels like games are probably more relevant than ever, and especially within this space. So yeah, you've kind of sparked something in me as well. So,
well, you are a delight to talk to.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for spending your time with us today. I really appreciate it. Can I paste your LinkedIn profile in the chat for folks if they want to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Reach out to you? Yeah,
I'd be happy to connect with anyone on the call, or also happy to talk to you about your specific organization, what you're thinking about games.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. And so everybody, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. Next broadcast is going to be Danny, who is actually in the audience now. He's going to be talking about lessons learned with e-learning projects, which everyone should be there, because I have talked to Danny a couple times, and wow, a lot for him to share. It's going to be a good one on Wednesday. And with that, Jennifer, thanks again, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.